Alright, well the G37 has come back to the garage for a little bit of issue. It's got a random misfire. It's throwing a P0300 code, which means one of the cylinders is misfiring. But when you're checking these and you get a misfire, in a lot of cases you might find something else that's wrong. So we got to look at maybe the mass airflow, check our piping, and check some other things just to make sure that we don't have any issues that might be throwing off the air-fuel mix for the car. Alright, so to get started on getting down to the spark plugs, first we got to get some stuff out of the way. So we got to take all this intake out, and we got to take the throttle body off because the coils and the plugs are down underneath, so some of this stuff's got to go. So we'll start with the intake box. So let's get it took loose. We'll take the mass airflow connector off and disconnect it from the air box. Should be able to just pull the air box straight up and out. There we go. Now we got that out of the way. So now what we want to do is disconnect the intake from the throttle body. Now, we just got to take this loose. Hey, look at that. I can tell you right there, one of the reasons why we might have a random misfire is because this hose right here is broken. Let me pull that off, because we may not even have a plug problem, may not have any problem. We got a problem with this hose. So if you look right there, this hose has got a crack in it. Let me get my flashlight and I'll show you. So, from over time you can see that this hose has developed a crack, and so the reason why that crack's important, and it could be causing the random misfire, is because the mass airflow is coming in here and it's coming from your air intake, and all of this is supposed to be metered air, and so with this crack right here, what it's allowing is air to flow through that crack, and it's unmetered in the mass airflow. So the car doesn't know that this extra air is coming in, and what it's doing is compensating the air-fuel mix for air it doesn't know it has. So I'd be willing to bet this right here is the reason why we're having a random misfire, and why it's not picking up a specific cylinder if it was a coil or if it was a spark plug. And then that may fix the problem. We'll just have to order some new pipe. So let's head on down through here while we're at it, take everything off and go ahead and do the spark plugs, and we'll clean up the throttle body if needed, and then put it all back together and see if this gets rid of our problem. Alright, so we are about ready to take the throttle body off. So now at this point we want to disconnect the batteries. Negative loose, so now everything's dead and we can work on taking this throttle body off. Go. So this guy's going to be in the way as well for the coil down here, so we can try to swing him around, or we can just take him loose, but we'll just pop him loose right here and pull him off. Just pull the clamp up, give it a little twist and pop him off. Now we're making some progress. We got one coil right here, a coil right here, and a coil under the throttle body. So with the throttle body loose, we can lean this forward and out of the way. And if you can see in the camera, it's kind of nasty. So we're going to clean that throttle body out a little bit and get that guy nice and clean again. That may help us a little. I'm going to get some wire and hold that throttle body over. We'll get him wired up. Now he's out of the way. I'm going to have to move the camera so you can see the coil packs down here. So we'll get over to the other side. The only thing we got left is this one hose right here. And so I'll just go ahead and pop it loose, and we should be able to access these coils. So let's go ahead and get it off while we're over here. But he'll come out of there. We'll just stand him up. Alright, so let's get the camera moved over so we can kind of see where we're taking the coils off. And then we'll pop a couple of these coils off and change these plugs. Alright, so we're ready to take some coils out. And so we don't want to mix things up as little as possible. So what I'm going to do is mark the coils. So the cylinder order on this one is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And so this is 1, 3, 5 on this side. So just to make sure that I don't put my coils back in different places. I mean, theoretically it doesn't really matter, but we'll just put them back the way they were. We're going to mark that one with a 1, this coil with a 3, and this coil with a 5. So we'll start on the back one back here because he looks like he might be more fun than any of them. So all we do is take the 10 millimeter and break it free. There is the connector, so we just popped it loose. So now we got the coil freed up. Now we can just pull the coil out. Some of these are a little difficult to get out. Some of them you can just wiggle. Fortunately for these, you can just wiggle them and they'll pop right out. So there's our little coil. Now one thing we notice, if you look on the end of the coil, there's a little bit of oil. And so this means that we must have a little bit of a gasket leak right around the plug. And if we pull that plug out and there's a bunch of oil all the way around it, then we're probably going to have to change some valve cover gaskets, because that might also be what's causing a misfire. If you get oil around those plugs, they'll arc out and then you won't get a fire on that cylinder. But that didn't look too bad for as long as these plugs have been in there. So we'll pull it out and we'll just check the plug and make sure. And now we just got to change the plug out. Alright, so to get the plugs out of these, it's a little bit of a aggravation because the plug itself is not a 5/8 standard one. They got a tiny little hole, and so you got to end up with a 9/16 socket deep well, and since there's no rubber in there to pull it out, you may have this little guy left in there. So when you get it loose, what you can do is get one of these little magnets. When we pull it out, we'll slip that down in there and grab the spark plug and pull him out. But before we do that, we want to make sure we don't lose any tools down in there. So what I'm going to do, this is just like the same diameter as the hole. So you can't tape on the outside, but what I'm going to do is tape on the inside. And so right here, I'm going to put some extra tape right inside. And then when I put my socket on, it's going to give it a little extra grip so that I don't lose my socket inside of there. So there we go. So now see, we got a little more grip and that socket's not going to come off. While I'm at it, I'm going to go ahead and tape this one too. So let's get our extensions taped together. That way we don't drop things in the motor so easily or leave a socket there. So now we can take our glued together socket, slip it down in there, and like I say, it just fits. And sometimes it'll pull it out. So got that in there. Now I just need to get one more extension and we'll be good to go. And then as you come out, kind of spin it and you'll keep everything together. Now you can see the plug didn't come with it. And so now what we got to do is reach down in there with our little magnet, grab the top of the plug, and we can pull the plug out. So if we look at our little plug, we can see our plug's kind of brown. We do have the tip left on the iridium, but the other tip is almost gone. And so we may in fact have eroded the tip off of this with this issue of the extra air coming in. May have run it so lean it eroded my tip off. So it was a good thing. We need to change these plugs out anyway. So we got our plug out. Now we just got to put the other plug back in. And so let's grab our new plug and we're going to put him back in there. This is the difficult parts, to get it to go back in there and know that you got it centered. But we're going to do a little trick with a little piece of tape and then we're going to get that back in there. So we'll be back in just a second as soon as I get some Antiseize and put it on the threads, because you can see it's a little difficult to get out. We want to put some Antiseize on that. Alright, so for our new plug, what we want to do, they come pre-gapped because these are iridiums and you don't want to mess around with the gaps on these. If it's it's been dropped, you just need to take it back. Don't try to gap it. But what we're going to use is some Antiseize. This is a copper formula, so it doesn't impact the conductivity of the plug down in your motor. And so all we want to do is get a little bit of this copper color Antiseize. We're going to use that on each plug. And what you want to do is just put it near to the bottom, run it around with your fingers, and then as you put the plug in, it's going to work its way up. So that Antiseize is kind of important. So now to get the plug back in, if we just put it in the socket, it's going to fall right back out. And we want to kind of get them to hold together so we can put it in there and feel it. So what I'm going to do is put a piece of electrical tape inside and hold that plug in, and then we'll get the tape back out. So let me get a piece of electrical tape. And what you want to do is make the tape long enough that you can see it way up here, because you're going to want to make sure that tape came out. So get you a long piece of electrical tape. What we're going to do is just tuck it around the corner inside, and then we put our plug in. So we just tuck it around and we get it to hold the plug. So it's still a little bit loose, so I'm going to use 2 pieces of tape. So let me get one more piece of tape. So now, see, we're holding the plug. So it took 3 things of electrical tape. Make it real smooth because that hole's real small. And then we reinsert our plug, and we'll lock it back in. So once you get the plug started, you'll feel it. And you know you got it when you pull your tool back out and the plug stays in there. So you can see the plug stayed. Now I can take the tape off and I'll be able to feel it. So you'll do that each time you do the plug. And then you'll know you got your plug in there straight, you didn't cross thread anything, and you wouldn't have to take this whole motor apart just because you cross threaded the spark plug. And crank it down with my hand, don't put the wrench on it till you feel it bottom out. And then you just want to bring it down and you'll feel it snug. And then it has a crush washer on the end of it. So when it snugs down, then you're just going to crank it about a quarter turn and that snugs it down. So now you can easily pull everything out. All your tools stayed together and you didn't have a problem losing anything inside of it. So all we got to do is put the coil back in and we're good to go. So while that hole is open, something might fall down in there. I'm just going to go ahead and slip the coil back in, and then I'll bolt all these down. So the coil goes back in, and we'll just set it there for a minute until we're ready to go. So we'll just put him back in that hole. We don't have anything going to fall down in there. So now we just repeat it for the other 2, put everything back together, and then we'll move over to the other side. Alright, so we got our plugs all done on this side, and we got our coils sitting back in there. So now all we got to do is just push them back down to line them up. And we're going to hook our electrical back up for that coil. And then we got our little bolt that has to go in. So it's pretty tight fit. You just want to line it up first. Start it with your fingers so you don't cross thread it into that brass. And then we're going to take our wrench and tighten it down. Alright, so those are all done. Now what we got to do is put our throttle body back on and put our piping back on, and then we're going to have to fix that pipe that's got the crack in it until we can get another pipe order. So we'll just reassemble all of this in high speed, and then we'll tape up that hose, and then we'll be done on this side. We'll be able to move over to the other side, which is going to work exactly the same. We just have to take the throttle body off, take all that out of the way. We're going to check our pipe over there and make sure it doesn't have any damage, and then we're going to just swap out. Alright, so there we go. So we got this side all done. We're all taped up again. Everything's bolted down, so we'll move over to the other side, do the same thing. We'll also check, make sure none of this is damaged, and we should be good to go. After all that, we'll hook the battery up, fire it up, and see if our misfire is gone. Alright, so there we go. We've got everything back on. Just to making sure, we went ahead and taped this one because the other one was bad. We got both sides done, everything's all connected up. So now we'll get everything finished out and we'll start it up and see how well it idles and see if the codes are gone. Alright, so let's get the battery hooked back up and then we will fire it up and see how she does. Alright, so we got everything back together. Now all we got to do is just make sure that the throttle bodies make a little whine sound when they start up. And we'll put the pedal all the way to the floor and then turn it back off, and then we'll fire it up. There goes the throttle bodies. So they went all the way out and they came all the way back. So now we just shut it back off and then we fire it up. And there we go. It sounds pretty good. We're going to rev it up and see how it sounds. Alright, she sounded really good, so I think we're good with that. Doesn't sound like there'd be any codes or any misfires, so now all we got to do is reprogram the windows on this car, because whenever you take the battery loose, you got to get the windows to where they'll go all the way back up and they'll do their little lock at the top. So we'll switch around over to the driver's side, show how to do that, and we'll be done. Alright, so in case anybody's wondering how you reset your anti-trap windows after you take the battery loose, we'll show this right at the last here. So here's the steps on how to do it. So you activate the car, get everything lit up, and then you're going to go over to the driver's door and you're going to push the window all the way down, which it's down already. And now you're going to take the window up, all the way up, and you hold it for 5 seconds at least. And then you release, and when you open the door it should drop it down ever so slightly, and then it starts working again. So now that door is done. You switch over to the passenger side and do the very same thing. Hold it down at the bottom, take it to the top, hold the button for 5 seconds. And then when you open the door, it ought to drop the window down. Just like that. So as simple as that, you reset your window tops. Well, alrighty, there we go. Got everything done and everything reset, so we should be in good shape again. We'll run it on down the road. Alright, back on the road again. Let's see if we got our power back. Yeah, now she sounds smooth. Yep, I believe that's got it. Well, alrighty. Well, thanks for watching. Reconnect the connector. Make sure they're seated good. And then we're gonna put the little bolts back. So these are kind of nice. They're magnetic. And so well, they were magnetic. This is the magnetic.
Let's try again.
Yep.